Okay, so I think we'll get started. Thank you again for joining our lively discussion and panel. We're really thrilled to have you here. My name is John Dillon. I'm the Text and Data Mining Product Manager at ProQuest, and we recently launched a new solution called TDM Studio, which we're delighted to talk about with you a bit today, as well as other things related to text and data mining. So this is kind of a lively discussion. If you don't know if you don't know what text and data mining is, it's when researchers, users, faculty, librarians, students use computer scripts to read tons and tons of text data. So often it's text data that would be impossible for a human being to read. And then what they do is they mine out of the text data, the large data sets, they mine out of it valuable insights. So these can be questions like, how do you read 1 million Wall Street Journal articles in 15 minutes? Did Shakespeare write all of the plays attributed to him? How does student emotion in an online setting impact their learning? How does CEO confidence, as shown by newspaper articles, impact stock and company performance? So what's amazing about text and data mining is that over the last 10 years, we've really seen it spread into all disciplines. So you have this very strange and in some ways fabulous phenomenon where folks in literary studies, art history, and history are using similar methods to folks in health studies, and legal studies. And there's a type of allure to text mining because it appears that some of these methods with a lot amount of text data afford new viewpoints and vantage points on questions that either weren't previously answerable or these are new answers to old questions. So to sort of support this research, TDM Studio was launched. We launched TDM Studio at ProQuest about, how many months ago? April. Geez, it feels like years ago. But in April of this year, we launched it. And basically, TDM Studio is a cloud-based computing environment that allows researchers, faculty, librarians, and students to run scripts against millions and millions of articles. So it's like it opens up tons of new content for tons of new questions, and often content that hasn't been queried in this way before. So some of the research findings are impressive. I want to thank my colleagues at ProQuest, Mindy, Frank, and Sarah, who helped launch this solution in April. And I also really want to thank, and I'm quite grateful for our panelists. We have three fabulous panelists for this lively discussion. And the perspectives they bring are amazing. Also, they've been so generous with their time. Feel very grateful for their support in this lively discussion. So just a brief thank you to them. So the way that the agenda is going to go, I know this is short. This is only a 45-minute session. So it's a 45-minute lively session. Is I'm going to turn it over to each presenter, panelist to speak briefly, 4 minutes each approximately, on their experience with TDM Studio and also with text and data mining more broadly. And then after those quick intros and comments, I have 1 or 2 prepared questions, and then we open it up for comments and discussion. And don't be, please don't be shy, because you know, we have sort of set things up, but we are dependent on you for questions and comments and suggestions. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be a comment or a suggestion based on your own experience or what you're seeing. Maybe you know, this is a new area for everyone, so it's exciting to hear perspectives that we may have missed and things like that. So yeah, so with that, thank you all again for joining, and I'm going to turn it over to Princeton researcher and graduate student, Gavin Cook.
Unmute myself. Thank you for the introduction, Jean. My name is Gavin. Can I advance the slides from here?
I think I'll advance for you, Gavin, if that's okay.
All right. Sounds good. So I'm Gavin in the middle. This is our panel. So if you, next slide, please. So I'm going to give you basically an overview of what it was like working with the TDM Studio and give you a feel of what the process is like to illuminate basically the value add. After that, Yu-Yang Zhong is going to give you an overview of some of the things that he's discovered with the studio. And then we'll round it out with a view of what it's like from the library perspective. So the main value add of this, as John illustrated, is that the TDM Studio gives you access to previously unavailable data that you can do whatever you want with. So it's sort of reading the Wall Street Journal in 15 minutes, everything that's ever been published in the Wall Street Journal. And so for me personally, there was all this data that my institution had access to that you could read manually, but you couldn't actually mine the data. And there are all these algorithms that have been developed that we wanted to use and we wanted to. So the question, if you could advance to the next slide, please. We were addressing, I was working with a team of labor economists on newspaper classifieds. We were working on a question about discrimination in the labor market, and nobody had actually mined newspaper classifieds. Very few teams have done it, and it's a laborious process. We ended up digitizing a paper ourselves, and it took thousands of hours. It was torturous. I would not wish that upon my worst enemy. And we then reached out to ProQuest, and we found that ProQuest had this exact information that we wanted in PDF and XML formats. So we were able to broker deal with ProQuest. This was before TDM Studio about 3 years ago, and get access to the files we wanted on a large external hard drive. And we then had to manage hundreds of gigabytes of files ourselves, and there were limits to the data that we could use. We couldn't actually access everything that we wanted, but we were of course thrilled. We had access to this data for the first time. Nobody else had really seen it. And it was just an incredible opportunity. Then, and I didn't think it could get any better than that. Then, if you could hit the next slide, please. All of a sudden, July 2019, we found out about the TDM Studio. And it wasn't access just to this newspaper data. It was access to even more data than I had thought possible. The amount of data that you can access through the TDM Studio is incredible. So the hard drive solution, creating data infrastructure for a single team was just, it was an expense, it was a hassle, it took a lot of time. The TDM Studio runs on an Amazon Web Services backbone. So everybody has their own login, we share data through the cloud, we can share code very easily. And there's also significantly room to scale up computing resources if it's needed. So if I want to run a very complicated model, we can do that. Sharing results is very easy. So just having this be in the cloud is already a huge value add. And on top of that, there's access to all the data that I could have ever possibly wanted and then some. So I'm currently using the TDM Studio for long-term projects on discrimination certification in academia, using the dissertation and theses database, which is incredible. Impossible to get access to before, now you have access to it, and more work on newspapers. So that's that, and I will now pass the torch to Yu-Yang.
Thanks so much, Gavin. So that's sort of perspective from graduate student researcher, and I love our panel. We have a great panel with different perspectives. Now over to Yu-Yang, who's going to talk about perspective from undergraduate researcher.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, Gavin. My name is Yu-Yang Zhong. I am from UC Berkeley. I'm a senior, currently studying psychology and data science. And today I could talk a little bit about what my project has been. So next slide, please. So in psychology, other social sciences, as well as some other life sciences, there's a notion called statistical significance. So essentially it says a researcher's done some research and we found some effect. And if it's statistical significance, it perhaps is real. And it's very commonly used, noted in a p-value, and commonly used thresholds are 0.05, 0.01, 0.01. And from there, it evolved into somewhat a replication crisis where researchers trying to replicate previous research done by old researchers, and they couldn't replicate the results. And the p-values that people reported when redone, are completely different and finding essentially no effect, right? So that's the notion of p-hacking, essentially saying that people are trying to hack towards a threshold instead of actually finding true results. There are also other research that falsify data, falsify values, and that's a real issue right now in a lot of these sciences. So this project, the motivation really is, we know that there is a problem, but can we actually quantify the problem and see how serious it is? So essentially, I went in to access a lot of old scholarly articles and pull out the p-values and see if actually they look funny. So next slide, please. So on here, this is a plot of reported p-values and also the recalculated p-values that I extracted and recalculated. And if we are expecting everything to be about the same, like we find the original result, we would see everything on that diagonal identity line. But as I've highlighted in these like red, green, purple boxes, those are values that are reported to be below 0.05, saying that they're very, very significant. But when I recalculated them, they're way bigger. So that means that they are actually not significant. So this is a full corpus of Journal of Personality and Social Psychology from 1985 to 2020. And just from one journal, there's a decent amount of falsifying data or incorrect data reporting that I can already find. Next slide, please. So how this really happened, for my project originally, I didn't know about TDM Studio. I didn't really know about how exactly I'm going to access all of these things. So the original conception of this project is downloading a bunch of these articles from Scite Articles database or some other databases. I do some optical character recognition to transform the PDFs and images into plain text files and then do some other things to it. And having access to TDM Studio and all of the backend stuff really, really sped up that process. And it really automated that extraction so that I don't need to go one by one to extract all of those numeric values. And I can just use something called regular expression to match patterns. There's actually a paper done in 2018 where some econ researchers went through, extracted p-values, but I think by hand. So this is a huge improvement in that area. It also allowed remote access. So as Gavin said, I was able to remote in and access this huge corpus of text data really anywhere whenever I have internet access, and I'm able to export anything that I extract out instead of the full article, so I don't need to find a place to store all of those things. And this is very, very adaptable across different programming languages. Python and R are very common in the sciences fields, and also in a very commonly used Jupyter Notebook environment. So that's a little bit about my project. I'll hand it off back to John.
Thank you so much, Yu-Young. Every time I hear about the project, it's shocking and surprising to me. So yeah, so undergraduate researcher producing super cool research at Berkeley. And now I'm delighted. I think that Tasha has been able to join. We had a few technical issues. Tasha, if you want to unmute yourself and dig in, I can control your slides. Looks like you may still be muted, Tasha. There you go.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm having technical problems connecting, so thank you. I'm just going to do this by phone for now, and I will retry again as soon as I'm done talking. So thank you. I'm Tasha Cooper. I'm a collection development and analysis librarian at Syracuse University Libraries. And Syracuse University is a private university in Syracuse, New York. We have an enrollment of about 20,000. We have 13 schools and colleges, and we offer graduate as well as undergraduate degrees. So I'm a member of a team that's been involved in TDM Studio implementation, and I wanted to express my thanks to and acknowledge the contributions of the team members that are listed on the slide. They've been really helpful, and so I really wanted to make sure they were acknowledged. So in recent years, we've had requests from researchers from several schools, colleges, disciplines related to text and data mining. You could go to the next slide if you haven't already. Thanks. And as SU libraries, we've been looking for ways to respond to these requests for text and data mining requests. So as one option, we explored TDM Studio. And again, I mentioned I'm part of the team that explored that implementation. Our team began work in April of 2020, and we worked on documentation. We tried out the platform. We worked on a guide. We, tried to really kind of prepare ourselves for this. ProQuest suggested we actually really try out the platform, which we did. And we're now just getting started with users trying it out. We are offering 2 time periods, a shorter one for exploration and a longer one for projects. And of course, all of that involves scheduling and coordination within SU libraries, but also with ProQuest and with the users. So our work is continuing. In other words, the team's work is going on. The main lessons I think I can share at this point are that the team approach served us well. It brought varying levels of interest and expertise to the project, which included some people with knowledge of content and some with subject knowledge and some with text and data mining knowledge. All of this took us time. It took us a while to figure out how we were going to offer this. As we progressed, we recognized that users and ideally one or more team members needed familiarity with R or Python and understanding of programming concepts. Looking ahead, the team members will continue to be involved again with scheduling and support and sharing information about this offering and in communications with ProQuest as well on an ongoing basis. And I think really overall the things that I'm thinking about and things to think about are working towards an understanding of what's possible and the expectations. And this really applies to text and data mining within as well as outside of TDM Studio. So, the content that you've just heard, the content users are working with is complex, and they're these are sort of complex queries with a lot of content. So, working with users may require discussing, what they're looking for, what years, what time periods, what types of publications, and whether that content is available to them, as well as clarifying what they can and cannot do with that. So in terms of downloading and access and the numbers of data sets, et cetera. So really understanding the parameters in advance. We will be assessing this during the upcoming year. We see the value in having a platform that's sort of predictable and consistent, that's available, would be available to SU users. But we obviously are kind of starting this out too, and we need to get feedback from our users. So that's all I have for now. I'm sorry again for the connection problems. I'm going to try one more time here in a minute. And I just want to thank everybody involved, and I look forward to hearing what others are doing. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tasha. And yeah, that's amazing. I'm delighted the technical issues, we got them mostly resolved. And yeah, so we have 3 different perspectives briefly presented. And so I have one question sort of for the panel to get started. And this will be, I have 2 questions prepared, but I'm hoping that once we have the first question, then there'll be enough questions from everyone else in the discussion. So the way we'll do questions is if you have a question in the Zoom icon, the hand icon, if you press the hand icon, your hand will go up, and then I'll call on you, and then you can unmute and ask the question. So instead of just dropping it in the chat box, you can also drop it in the chat box if you want, but this way maybe we'll get more human voices, and that will lead to more discussions. So one question, and then we open it up for everyone and ask any questions or comments. Maybe you have a suggestion, lively discussion, so it doesn't need to be a question. So first one, let's see here. So this is the question here. What's the most challenging aspect of producing or supporting text mining research? So most challenging aspect of producing or supporting text mining research. And let's go first over to the research side of things, Gavin or Yu Young, do you want to take a swing at this question? You each can, if you like.
Young, would you like to start? I could start as well.
Hey, you can go.
All right. So text mining is a different skill set, basically. And so normally when one is trained in a traditional curriculum for the social sciences or the humanistic sciences, there's not a lot of, there might be statistical training, but there's not a lot of computer science training. And so it's a different way of thinking about statistics. Oftentimes there's a lot of, it's similar concepts, but literally with just different verbiage is one thing. And then there's software engineering, basically. And so that's the biggest thing. You have to relearn statistics. Sometimes your name is for old tricks and you have to learn, basic software engineering. It's not that bad, but it is a bit of a leap. And the learning infrastructure is sort of hard to find. Not a lot of places teach this.
Gavin, is there in sociology in your program, is there any class or how did you learn these things?
In my department, excuse me, there is a professor who does this. So, and there is a class with research design for natural language processing and social sciences, which is its own thing. But the actual techniques you just kind of have to do.
Learn by doing.
Yeah, learn by doing. And that's the way it is. It's an apprenticeship model through a lot of social departments in the United States.
Wow, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I know educational infrastructure around this is still not coalesced. So it's, yeah, learn by doing seems to be the standard. Yu Young, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And it's the infrastructure for learning text data mining is, I would say, not really robust across, major universities even. And really, this is not my psychology training. This is my data science training. And data science is only a thing on campus for a few years. I was actually one of the first people to declare the data science major. So yeah, it's a growing field, and I feel like even when people talk about data science, text data mining is not at the forefront. People think about machine learning, AI, all of those like fancy stuff that is very statistically robust, and then you have text data mining where it's not the traditional data science that people think about, and it's also not the traditional methods that are taught. But I'm glad that I was able to come across some of those in some elective classes. And I think just to add on to the challenging aspect, as I think the second point is also finding the right corpus to work with. A lot of time you want to find something, but you don't know what's out there. And that was a little bit of my issue as well, just like finding the right text to work with, making sure that they're actually available. And I can't use Project Gutenberg and all of those Charles Dickens and Jane Austen texts to analyze psychology. It will be good practice with the skill, but actually working with research needs some work to find the right text to work with.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's, I think, a very good point as well. I think I just want to also, Tasha, if you're on, if you're able to rejoin. Oh yeah, tell us from Yu Young and Gavin kindly talked about the research perspective and some of the challenges. What's the top one, top of your list as far as challenging aspect of producing or supporting text mining research?
I don't know that I have one at the top of the list, but I'll certainly say time, the time involved in kind of figuring out how we want to do this is one thing. Funding, there's money involved. And I think really, understanding it, do we have what is needed, and what are people looking for? So like understanding what people need and whether we have access to that. So I'd put all three of those right at the top, and how to provide this as a service.
Yeah, that last point is brilliant. That how do you sort of industrialize it so that it can be, you can support, it doesn't take, 3 resources and $15,000 to support one project, this type of thing.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's a great point. Yeah, so, okay. So I think we'll take a leap here and we'll open it up for questions. So, okay. So if you have a question or if you have a comment, let's try this, and hopefully hopefully we'll get one or two takers here. If you would kindly put your hand up, then I'll call on you and we can start the organic, lively discussion, hopefully.
And John, this is Allison. We did get a bunch of chatted questions. So while we're waiting for people to raise their hands, I can read a couple of those.
Yeah, do it. That's great, Allison. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for all these great questions. So somebody asked about TDM Studio. Do you only have access to the databases you license, or does TDM Studio give you access to a wide range of data on its own?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'll just tackle this one. TDM Studio gives you access to all of the PAL or sub content that you subscribe to through ProQuest. So one cool thing, as Gavin noted, is it can be a massive amount of content. Like it can be tens of thousands of different publication titles. And what's great is that some of those publication titles, I mean, maybe they get a tiny amount of, traditional usage. You're sitting there with your coffee reading it like this, but it kind of breathes fresh life into some of these more arcane publication titles. So yeah.
Okay, and then there was another question. Is it a platform you license on its own on an annual basis, or is it a service you set up at a point of need when a researcher needs it for a project?
Yeah, so that's another great question. If other people have any suggestions on this front, feel free to jump in. Definitely do jump in about any other approaches to solving this need. But specifically for TDM Studio, we offer a workbench, and a workbench can support one researcher at a time. And then it's like a library asset that can be given to another researcher. That's one model. And then we have another model, which is unlimited, which we're super excited about. And that basically, you could give one to every single person in your data science program if you wanted. So that basically each person has their own account and they log in. And from your perspective, Gavin and Yu-Young, talk about the cadence of research, whether it's, what is it, which of these models is appealing, and what is the cadence of research like? Is it all done in a weekend, or is it done consistently, or are there peaks and valleys? What is this from researcher perspective? What do you think?
So I can also answer a few things in the chat as it's going.
Oh, great.
Brian Beniluz, I do think that there's support for Arabic and Chinese corpora. I will defer to John on that. And then Barbara Levergood, there is a set of built-in tools that the TDM Studio offers, and it's basically built on like an Anaconda backbone, Jupyter notebooks. Super convenient, and it's basically what I would have wanted anyway. So it works very, very well. And as far as the research process goes, at the grad student level, there's sort of longer term projects. And so the way that we've approached this in our lab is we look at the TDM Studio as a data set that we hope to get 2 to 3 papers out of, because it is so rich. We don't think we can do everything in one pass. So I'm currently on, there's 2 to 5 papers that I might get out of this working with the TDM Studio, and it ends up being not like one weekend cramming, but sort of long-term sustained work with multiple collaborators. So it's sort of a 2 to 3 year thing. Wow. So the unlimited model in that sense is sort of appealing to us.
Yu-Young, that's fabulous. No, thanks for tackling some of the other questions as well. Yu-Young, other thoughts?
Yeah, my process, I think, looks slightly different from what Gavin's seen was doing. I was really focused on one specific feature in all of the full text. So a lot of my work are actually offline. So TDM Studio ended up being more of an export tool, an extraction tool. And I was lucky to have those sample files that John was able to provide. And they essentially had the formats of all of the XML files. So the script was all set up offline, and then I just loaded it up and consistently improved it. I won't know if there are issues until I see it running on there. So that has been a process mainly that is on the studio. But those are the two parts really that drives my research.
To the process, yeah, it's a good note. So we have some researchers, so it's great to have two different perspectives on this. So also we have researchers like Yu Yang just noted, who basically within the studio, they get the features they need, and then they do additional analysis or most of the analysis outside of the studio. That also works well when it needs to be hooked up or hooked into other data sets, external data sets, things like that. Or you can bring the data sets into the studio, any which way is fine. Those are two approaches. Tasha, anything on this front, or yeah?
Yeah, I don't think I have too much to add to that. So yeah, you should go on to the next question.
Okay, next question. Let's see.
So we've actually
Go ahead.
had, I'm gonna try to unmute Lindsay, who raised her hand. Sure. Let's see if we can do this. Or Lindsay, can you try unmuting yourself?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Yes, thank you.
That's great.
So I'm actually a student at Syracuse in the library and data science program. So that's cool that we have access to this. Is it just data sets, or does it offer like test sets and training sets so you can do like sentiment analysis and topic modeling and stuff like that? Or do you have to actually go in and label those yourself, add labels and stuff yourself to the data, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So we provide a number of sample scripts which serve as training materials, and those are growing. Actually, one we're releasing in December is a lot of sample scripts around sentiment. And this is actually so Gavin was actually one of our first development partners on the studio. And when he started, there were no sample scripts and there were no sample topic modeling scripts, but now researchers are sharing them with us, and then we're making some in-house, and those provide good samples. The only other small thing I'll note is in December, as part of the studio, we're also adding a graphical piece, so no coding needed. So it's basically push button. And it's the first method we're launching in December is geographic analysis, but next year we're launching one devoted to sentiment analysis because it's really growing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a great question. Thank you so much for it. Anything, if anyone else wants to jump in on this front, if they're seeing growth in sentiment analysis at all in their fields or things like that. If not, we can move ahead. Okay, let's press ahead. Another question or comment. Feel free to comment as well, because we try and embrace discussion.
We had a couple questions in the chat about analyzing content that's not ProQuest content and how that works.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yu Yang and Gavin, have either of you brought stuff into the studio before, or no? Or foresee bringing stuff in?
Aha, I have not, but
Okay.
I know that it is possible because it is written in the training materials for the CDM Studio. I have uploaded sort of external things for packages. So there's external software I brought in, and you use the same process to bring in your own files.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's a great point. So we do have some researchers, and they bring in sort of lists of keywords or models, and that basically anything you want to bring into the studio, you can bring in. The only thing, and this is I think where the library also plays a critical role, maybe you've encountered this as well, Tasha, is that is letting users know, or educating users, or working with users that the content that comes into the studio, they need to have rights for that content, because that's part of the solution, is that in order to bring additional content in, you need to have rights to that content. So there's some complexity there. I'm sure everyone has encountered this. Okay, does it have to live on US servers? Does it need to live on university servers? These types of things. And maybe, yeah, if you have more to add, Tasha, on this front, definitely jump in.
Yeah, no, I agree that that is a big question, and I think that's the question that kind of comes up. People see a lot of this digitized content available and want to do something with it, but there really are rights involved before that can happen. So one of the things about TDM Studio is that a lot of the ProQuest content is on that studio, so that part is okay for that content. But bringing something in, you really would have to determine whether it was, allowable, whether there were rights issues involved before that would happen. And so, absolutely, that's a recurring question that needs to be looked at.
Have you found a good way to tackle it with users, Tasha?
No, other than kind of explaining what's available, what the limitations are, what isn't available, and again, trying to clarify a little bit about what people want so that we could find out whether we can get the rights to it. But, sometimes it's not always clear exactly what content people are looking for, and so we have to kind of pinpoint that before you can find out whether you can use it. So,
yeah, no,
it's not straightforward.
Yeah, it's not straightforward. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I just saw this last question in the chat from Deirdre Clarkin about, absolutely, green OA content from an institutional repository. That's a brilliant suggestion, a brilliant idea, actually. I mean, I wonder even if we could facilitate that in some way that would make it easier to bring in IR content. But you're absolutely right. The second point is exactly right. It would need to be, so all the content, one of the beautiful things in the studio is that because ProQuest aggregates content, it all is in the same XML schema. So a script that Yu Young writes for his work can work on a data set that Gavin has made for his work. It would likely need to be an XML. Technically, it wouldn't have to. You could upload images if you wanted to TDM Studio, but in order to make it machine readable, as Gavin noted in his talk, you're going to have to scan it, if it is an image, and other people spot other questions that they want to tackle. I'm willing to.
We've had a couple people ask if the slide deck will be available, and yes, we can. We'll make sure to make it available. I'll work with the Charleston folks to make sure that I'm doing that in the right way, and that you can go in and download it.
Excellent. That sounds great. Other things you've seen, Allison?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, there was a question about the download limit. What the download limit is?
Yeah, that's another fabulous question. So the download limit is 15 megabytes per week. So that's up from 5 megabytes. It used to be 5 megabytes, but folks wanted more export. That's not for full text export, but for any features or derived results. And it seems like it's currently meeting needs. We haven't gotten any complaints about the new download limit. I don't know, Gavin, Tasha, Yu Young, what your thoughts are on this sort of download gate, or any additional comments? Has it met your need? Is there,
15 is great. I've had not too many issues with 15.
Okay, sounds good.
Once in a blue moon, you have to set something up, but
say again. Sorry.
So once in a blue moon, if you got an enormous model, you might have to, do some sort of finagling with compression. But other than that, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Sometimes a model, and then we do make, ad hoc exception for a model, and delighted to see. Yeah, thanks for the kind words, Harold. Great to have you on the call. 15. I think last week we wrote out 15 megabyte weekly rolling limit, and you can obviously compress the text as well, or the features. So far it seems to be working okay. But yeah, I got one more question for the panel, unless there's any other. I see lots of questions. I don't know if there's anyone spot any other one they want to tackle. I would prefer to give it to not take any more questions, even though I'm interested. How much? This is a great one. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Allison.
Oh, I was going to say, I think we tackled most of the kind of group the questions together in the chat, but if you see any, feel free to take them.
I guess, okay, so I think this is one topic that we haven't covered. I know we only have 3 minutes and I want to end on time, but what do you think what is the sort of, anyone have, and this is both for our panelists and also if folks on the line also have thoughts. I mean, what does this look like in 5 or 10 years? Does anyone have a good grasp of a vision for where text and data mining goes in 5 or 10 years, either in your discipline or, I mean, as a community? This is a genuine question. I don't have the answer. I wish I had the answer, but yeah, maybe from one of our panelists first, if they want to speak to it, and then maybe that's a fine place to conclude, but please.
I don't, go ahead.
In psychology, at least on the research that I previously worked as a research assistant for, there's a lot of human numeric coding. So, we read a passage and we say, oh, this person is describing this, we rank it 1 through 5, something like that. And I can see that text data mining might actually help speed up that process, right? Especially around sentiment analyses. That's actually very common to see, how people are reacting and writing things. So that's one aspect that I see that could be happening within the next few years is, incorporating a lot more of these automations in ranking and rating human responses. That's
amazing. That's cool. Yeah, that's amazing response. I agree with you. I think it's going to happen. All that human coding is going to be automated for some of this work, or maybe not all of it, but some of it. I mean, it's a fascinating area. Gavin or Tasha, we give you each a final word here.
I actually have a paper in the works that uses a mixture of human coding and then a recent transformer-based model from Google called BERT. Wow. And you can marry those things to basically scale up coding. So that was a very, very prophetic young. Computer science is sort of the way it's discussed in sociological circles is that computer science is about 5 to 10 years ahead of where the social sciences are in terms of natural language processing and computer vision. And that is, in computer science years, that's a long time. I mean, given that deep learning, this like big buzzword, really only became big in 2010, 2012. And now we're hearing about it all the time. That's like 8 years ago. So, it remains to be seen what from computer science, which is mostly focused on prediction, becomes big in sociology, which is focused on explanation. So it's exciting is the main takeaway.
That's a great, I think, a great way to phrase it. It's exciting. Over to you, Tasha. Final word before we wrap up the discussion.
Yeah, and I think along with all of those exciting new ways that people are looking at content and a lot of their new research initiatives, a lot of this is figuring out from the library side how we're providing access. So I think we're going to have to work at least, and kind of smoothing this off, really figuring out if there's a system. And I would love to hear from other people if they are, if they found good ways to do this, but, finding ways to respond to these requests, I think, because I do see interest in this, again, in different disciplines. And we've just heard from the researchers on the panel about future things that might happen. So planning ahead for that, I think, that's what I see. Yeah. So it's not kind of, it's not simply reacting to each kind of request, but figuring it out going ahead.
Yeah, no, it's another very critical piece. And so I would like to thank you all again. It's been really pleasant. I wish we actually had more time. Thank you as well for all the questions in the chat, suggestions for reading on text mining. Maybe we'll add those to the slide if other folks don't mind. And this way,
that would be great.
Yeah, so it's great.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So thank you all again. Thank you to the panelists. They put in tons of time. And feel free to follow up with any of them. The emails are here. And we'll hang for another minute or two, but hope you're enjoying the conference. And thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you to all. Thank you to everybody for attending. And I'm sorry for the connection problems on my side.